It was a cold autumn night in the late 1980s. A long, empty highway stretched across miles of quiet land somewhere in the United States. The road cut through thick forests and lonely hills where very few travelers passed after sunset. Most drivers avoided this road at night. But on this particular evening, a truck driver named Daniel Harris had no choice. Daniel had been driving for nearly 6 hours, transporting supplies from one state to another. His eyes were tired, and the darkness around him felt unusually heavy. The only sound in the night was the low rumble of his truck engine and the wind brushing against the road. As Daniel drove deeper into the countryside, he noticed something ahead in the distance. A small town. The sign near the road read, "Welcome to Blackridge, population 2,104. Daniel felt a small sense of relief. A town meant gas stations, lights, maybe a small diner where he could rest for a few minutes. But as he drove into Blackridge, something immediately felt wrong. The streets were completely empty. No cars driving, no people walking, no lights in the windows. At first, Daniel assumed everyone had simply gone to sleep. It was late, after all. But the deeper he drove into the town, the stranger things became. A grocery store stood open with its lights still on. The front door slowly creaked as the wind pushed it back and forth. Daniel slowed his truck and stared through the window as he passed. Inside the store, the shelves were full, the lights were on, but there was no cashier, no customers, no sound. Just a dead, unnatural quiet that hung in the air like a thick fog. Then Daniel saw something that made his heart begin to race. The door of a small restaurant across the street was wide open. The lights were still on inside, and through the window, Daniel could see plates of food sitting on the tables. Fresh food, as if people had been eating there only minutes ago. But the restaurant was completely empty, not a single person inside. And that was the moment Daniel realized something terrifying. This town hadn't slowly become empty. It looked like everyone had vanished at the exact same time.
Daniel stood frozen outside his truck, staring at the open restaurant across the street. The wind gently pushed the door back and forth, making a slow, creaking sound that echoed through the empty street. He swallowed hard. Something about the town of Blackridge felt deeply wrong. Not just quiet, but abandoned in a way that didn't make sense. Daniel slowly walked across the street toward the restaurant. His boots tapped loudly against the pavement, the sound echoing around the buildings. Normally, a town at night would still have life. A dog barking somewhere, a television playing inside a house, maybe the distant laughter of people inside a bar. But here, there was nothing. Daniel stepped inside the restaurant. The warm lights buzzed softly above him. The smell of freshly cooked food still filled the room. On one table sat 2 plates of half-eaten meals. A cup of coffee was still steaming slightly. Daniel walked closer and touched the cup. It was warm. His heart began beating faster. "Someone was just here," he whispered. He looked around the room. The kitchen door was open. Inside, pots still sat on the stove. One of the burners was still glowing red, but the cook was gone. Daniel suddenly felt the heavy weight of fear pressing against his chest. He quickly stepped back outside and looked down the empty street again. "How can an entire town disappear?" he muttered. Trying to calm himself, Daniel decided there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe there had been an emergency evacuation. Maybe something had forced everyone to leave suddenly. But if that was true, why were the cars still here? Why were the lights still on? And why did it look like everyone had vanished in the middle of whatever they were doing? Daniel decided to check more buildings. He walked into a small grocery store nearby. The door chimed as it opened. The sound echoed strangely in the empty store. Shopping carts stood between the aisles. One of them still had groceries inside: bread, milk, canned food. A loaf of bread had fallen onto the floor. Daniel slowly moved deeper into the store. Behind the counter, the cash register was open, but no money had been taken. It was all still there. "Okay, this is getting creepy," Daniel whispered under his breath. Then, suddenly, a loud metallic sound echoed somewhere outside. Clang! Daniel jumped and turned quickly toward the door. His heart pounded. He stepped outside again, scanning the street carefully. For a moment, he thought maybe someone else was still in the town, maybe another traveler, but the street remained completely empty. Then Daniel noticed something new. At the far end of the road stood a tall metal pole with a loudspeaker attached to it, a town announcement speaker. It looked old and slightly rusted, and strangely, a faint static noise was coming from it. Daniel slowly walked toward the pole. As he got closer, the static became louder. Shh. Then, suddenly, a voice burst through the speaker. "Attention, residents, this is an emergency broadcast." Daniel froze in place. The voice sounded distorted and broken, as if it had been repeating the same message for hours. "All residents must immediately evacuate the area." The message crackled again. "This is not a drill. Repeat, evacuate immediately." Daniel stared up at the speaker in shock. Evacuate? Why? The message continued. "Do not remain inside the town. Leave immediately. Authorities are on the way." Then the speaker went silent again. Just static. Daniel felt a wave of confusion wash over him. If the town had been evacuated, why were the people gone but their cars still here? Why were their meals still on the tables? And why did it look like everyone had disappeared at the exact same moment? Something about the message didn't make sense. It felt incomplete, like the most important part had been cut off. Daniel turned slowly and looked beyond the town. Past the last row of buildings, beyond the dark fields, there was a narrow dirt road leading toward the hills outside Blackridge. At the end of that road stood something Daniel hadn't noticed before. A large building surrounded by a tall metal fence. It looked industrial, almost like a government facility. One dim light glowed above its entrance. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Was that always there? He wondered aloud. The building stood alone in the darkness, silent and mysterious. And suddenly, Daniel had a strange feeling, a feeling that whatever happened to the people of Blackridge, the answers might be waiting inside that building. But as Daniel stared at it from a distance, he noticed something else. The front gate was slightly open, and the wind slowly pushed it back and forth, creak, as if inviting him to come closer. Daniel took a deep breath. Part of him wanted to get back into his truck and drive away as fast as possible, but another part of him needed to know the truth. So Daniel started walking down the dirt road toward the strange building outside the town, completely unaware that what he was about to discover would turn the mystery of Blackridge into something far more terrifying than he could ever imagine. The dirt road stretched quietly in front of Daniel as he walked toward the strange building outside the town.
The wind blew softly across the empty fields, making the dry grass whisper in the darkness. With every step he took, the town of Blackridge looked smaller behind him, and the building ahead looked more unsettling. It was large and square, built from cold gray concrete. Tall metal fences surrounded it, and warning signs hung loosely from the wires, but most of the signs had faded over time. Daniel stepped closer to the gate. It was slightly open, just as he had seen from the road. The metal hinges creaked loudly when he pushed it. The sound echoed through the silent field. "Hello?" Daniel called out cautiously. No answer. He walked through the gate and slowly approached the entrance of the building. Above the door, a small flickering light buzzed softly. The door itself was thick and heavy, like something you would see in a military facility. Daniel grabbed the handle and pushed. To his surprise, it wasn't locked. The door slowly opened. Inside, the air smelled stale and cold, like a place that had been closed for a long time. Dim emergency lights glowed along the walls, casting long shadows across the hallway. Daniel stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind him with a loud bang. He jumped and turned around quickly. His heart was racing now. "Okay, calm down," he whispered to himself. The hallway stretched ahead of him, lined with several metal doors. Most of them were slightly open. Daniel walked to the first one and carefully pushed it wider. Inside the room were desks, computers, and large monitors. Some of the screens were still glowing faintly. Dust covered the equipment. But something strange caught Daniel's attention. On one desk sat a stack of documents with the name of the town printed on the top page, Blackridge Research Project. Daniel frowned. "Research project?" he said quietly. He flipped through the papers quickly, but most of the pages were full of complicated scientific information he didn't understand. But one sentence stood out. "Population monitoring continues. Phase 3 scheduled for final testing." Daniel felt uneasy. What kind of testing involved an entire town? Then, suddenly, a faint humming sound echoed somewhere deeper in the building. Daniel followed the sound down the hallway. At the end of the corridor, he found a metal staircase leading downward. Cold air drifted from the darkness below. Daniel hesitated for a moment, but curiosity pushed him forward. He slowly walked down the stairs. Each step echoed through the underground space. At the bottom of the staircase, he entered a large underground room, and what he saw made him stop completely. The room was enormous. Rows of machines lined the walls. Large glass containers stood empty in the center of the room, and in front of one machine sat a small recording device with a blinking red light. It was still playing. Daniel walked closer. A recorded voice suddenly spoke from the device. "This is Dr. Elaine Carter, final log of the Blackridge project." Daniel listened carefully. "For years, we studied the strange energy field beneath this land. For years, the town's residents showed no reaction. But during Phase 3, everything changed." The recording crackled. The energy pulse spread faster than we predicted. People began disappearing. Daniel's eyes widened. "Disappearing?" The voice continued, sounding more panicked now. "Not dying, not leaving, simply vanishing, as if they were pulled out of our world entirely." Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. "We tried to stop the experiment, but it was already too late. If anyone finds this message, do not activate the machine again." The recording ended suddenly. Silence filled the underground room. Daniel stood there, staring at the strange machines around him. A terrible realization slowly formed in his mind. Something beneath Blackridge, something powerful and unknown, had caused the entire town to vanish. Not evacuate, not escape, but disappear from reality itself. Then, suddenly, one of the machines behind him made a loud clicking sound. Daniel spun around. A control panel had suddenly lit up. Buttons began flashing, and a deep humming noise filled the underground chamber. The machine was starting up again. Daniel rushed toward it in panic. "Hey, stop!" he shouted, pressing random buttons, but nothing happened. The humming grew louder. The air around him began to vibrate. Lights flickered wildly. And then Daniel noticed something terrifying. The air in the center of the room was beginning to twist and ripple, like invisible waves moving through space. Daniel took a slow step backward. His heart pounded violently in his chest, and in that moment he remembered the warning from the recording: "Do not activate the machine again." But it was already too late. The humming grew louder. The twisting air began to form a glowing circle in the middle of the room. A swirling portal of light slowly opened. Daniel stared at it in horror. For just a second, he thought he could see shapes moving inside the glowing portal. Shadows, figures, almost like people trapped somewhere far away. Then the machine suddenly shut down. The portal vanished instantly. The room went dark and silent again. Daniel stood there, shaking. Whatever had happened to the people of Blackridge, they hadn't simply disappeared. They'd been pulled somewhere else, somewhere unknown. And if the machine ever started again, the same thing could happen to another town, or even the entire world. Daniel slowly turned and walked back toward the stairs. He didn't take any documents. He didn't touch the machines. He just left. By the time the sun rose the next morning, Daniel was already miles away from Blackridge. He never told anyone what he saw that night. But sometimes, late at night, when Daniel hears strange static on the radio, he remembers the empty streets, the abandoned meals, and the glowing portal beneath the town. And he wonders something that still terrifies him to this day. What if the people of Blackridge are still out there somewhere, waiting to come back?